Hello everyone, welcome to Toyeen Talk. No be today Wickedness by record label starts. This story, I saw the story on social media and I said let me come and read it to you all because nǹkan tó ṣẹlẹ̀ ní bíbá náà ó dàbẹ̀ nípò òun ló ń ṣẹlẹ̀ lọ́wọ́lọ́wọ́ nínú ayé Muhbad àti àwọn every other person tó jẹ́ pé wọ́n fẹ́ ṣẹ̀ṣẹ̀ sign record label so that wọ́n á fi eléyìí ṣe àríkọ́gbọ́n àbí àwọn òbí náà á máa lè take this home láti lè bá àwọn ọmọ wa sọ̀rọ̀ ẹni kí ẹ kí n kà fún yín. The story of the epic battle between King Sunny Ade and Chief Bolarinwa Abioro. It was in 1974 that the news broke. Chief Bolarinwa Abioro, the Balogun of Ipokia, the chairman of African Songs Limited, had taken his stars musician to court. Everyone who knew King Sunny Ade knew Abioro. Everyone who knew Abioro knew Sunny Ade. Sunny Adeniyi. Sunny was the son, Abioro was the father. What could have gone wrong between father and mother? KSA was the second artist to be signed to the stable of African Songs Limited. Ayinde Bakare was the first. Sikiru Ayinde Barrister was the third. Like most creative people, young Sunny Ade was more concerned about his passion and less concerned about the business aspect of music. His passion was to play music and excel as a musician. It was enough that Abioro, one of the biggest men in the music industry, at the time was ready to promote him. They brought documents for Sonny and his band boys to sign. They call it a contract. It could have been called any other name for all that KS cared. Wọ́n ní kó wá jẹ sàárà ó ní ọjọ́ ti wọnú jù ṣé ata ni wọ́n ní kó mú wá ní àbí iyọ̀. You are invited to a free feast. You are complaining about the short notice. Are they asking you to bring salt or pepper? Sunny Ade and his boys didn't hesitate. It is doubtful if any of them read what the contract said. The most important thing was that they were going to become recording artists. Sunny signed. His band boys signed. Everybody was happy. The contract was for 5 years. However, before its expiration, KSA had become a household name. His album, Challenge Cup, sold in excess of 500,000 copies. It was certain that King Sunny Ade was going to dominate the music scene for a very long time to come. African Songs Limited knew a good product when it saw one. The management of the company didn't wait for the first contract to expire before they brought a new contract. The new agreement was carefully worded. KSA and his band boss agreed to perform and record exclusive for ASL for a period of 5 years. ASL had full copyright to all compositions and recordings of Sunny Ade's. ASL was entitled to the sole right of reproduction, and use of King Sunny Ade performance throughout the world. That was not all. During the period of the agreement, KSA was prohibited from rendering any performance whatsoever to himself, any company or group of persons. The contract also stipulated that ASL had the option to renew the agreement at its expiration for a further term of 2 years or for any other longer period. Sunny Ade had no such rights. That was not all. On the sale of every album, which price was then fixed at 6 naira, KSA and his boss were entitled to a princely sum of 20 kobo. Yes, you read that right. African Songs would go home with the remaining 5 naira 80 kobo. Onigegewura mathematics has never been good. He is just an amateur historian. You can do the sum yourself. Still basking in the euphoria of his growing fame, Sunny gracefully signed again. His band boss signed 20 kobo was still something. Orogún ìyá rẹ̀ dá ṣòkòtò fún ẹ. O ní kò balẹ̀. Mélòó ni ìyá tó bí ẹ dá fún ẹ? You are complaining that the trousers made for you by your stepmother was not long enough. Where is the one your own mother made for you? They were expecting their 20 kobo royalty on every album. Well, when the time came for actual payment, it was then discovered that mathematically and arithmetically it was not supposed to be 20 kobo. They had not factored the cost of publicity and the promotion. And since it was the artist that was being promoted, he must be the one to bear the cost. After the addition and subtraction, Sonny was given 15 kobo. Can you imagine that? 15 kobo per album. KSA was not Chike Obi, the mathematician, but he knew that 20 kobo and 15 kobo were not the same thing. Compared with his contemporaries in the music industry, KSA realized that he was holding the short end of the stick. His colleagues, Baba Commander, Chief Ebenezer Obey was earning as higher as 70 kobo per album. Others were earning between 35 kobo and 60 kobo. Báwo lẹ̀yin náà ṣe máa feel tó bá jẹ́ pé ẹ̀yin lẹ wà nínú situation tí King Sunny Adé wà lọ́jọ́ yẹn? That was when Sunny Adé decided to ask Chief Abioro for a raise of the royalty payment. The chairman, listening patiently to KSA and his colleagues, he was nodding as they conversed, one reason after another, why a raise was in order. When they finished, Chief Abioro flipped open a file he had on his table. He brought out a bundle of documents. Even from where he was seated across the table, Sonny saw that it was a copy of the contract he signed. An agreement is an agreement. It is a binding contract. The chief informed them, this is what you signed. This is what you are entitled to. No more, no less. He returned the document to the file. Case dismissed. But Sonny was not done. Chief, this is not about contracts. You are our father. Our request is for adequate compensation, sir. Let's leave the contract aside, Chief. Chief Abiore looked at the youngster the way a parent looks at a child asking for another candy. Leave the contract aside? We should leave the contract aside? The chairman asked incredulously. You know, it would be nice to leave the contract aside, but you know what? That would be illegal. Haba, illegality. It was then that someone brought up the idea of requesting some of his friends to plead their case. Sonny agreed. After all, ẹni tí ó mọ ojú ògún nípa obìnrin rẹ̀. It is the person who is conversant with Ogun, the god of iron, that is usually given the duty of administering to its rights. They went to meet Prince Okunade Shujuade, who would later become Oni of Ife. They also met with Chief Afolabi Joseph. Even Chief Ebenezer Obey was also requested to intervene, as well as Chief Nuruddin Alowonle. The eminent persons appears in the court of the Balogun of Ipokia as Mrs. Kuriasi. On behalf of the musician, Mrs. Kuriasi are lawyers invited by the judges to assist in the filing briefs that they may effort to the court in deciding a case. Our eminent persons argued their case like experienced advocates. They cited relevant sections of the unwritten Yoruba constitution. They cited Yoruba proverbs. They made reference to the story of Oduduwa. The presiding chairman listened to their submissions and summary dismissed the case. Contract is contract. Agbára pọ̀. Chief did not only dismiss the request for a raise, he opened another file on his table and brought out a new set of documents. Your guess is right. A new 5-year contract. By now, Sunny Ade had learnt enough law. He had become a professional mathematician. He had obtained his Master of Business Administration from practical experience. He knew the implication of putting pen to paper. He applied for an adjournment. The king of African beat found himself in a quandary. He knew songs were ready, but Chief had threatened not to release any new album until he signed the new contract. And King Sunny Ade was not ready to sign any new contract. tó bá yẹ pé ẹ̀yin náà níṣẹ́ máa sign rárá náà until the issue of royalty was resolved ọ̀dọ̀ tẹ́ bá tó yanjú gbogbo nǹkan tẹ́ jọ ń fà nílẹ̀ẹ́lẹ̀ kóníkálukú mọ ibi tó stand dé. King Sunny Adé remember his grandmother's proverb tí àbíkú bá gbọ́n ọgbọ́n àti kó ní ìgbà ẹ̀rùn ìyá àbíkú á gbọ́n ọgbọ́n àti sín okó ẹ̀ sí etídò. If an Abiku decided to die during the dry season, when he knew that the ground would be hard to dig, his parents would also decide to bury him by the riverside where the ground would not be hard to dig. Sunny Ade decided to release his record with another company. His plan was to use the album to bargain for a better deal with African Sun instead of the measly 20 kobo. He was confident that the chairman would be ready to pay him at least £1 per copy. The album was recorded in Nigeria but taken to London for mixing. What Sunny Ade did not know was that Chief Abioro was a master at the game. Before Sunny could get a copy of his own album, Chief Abioro was already in possession of the new record. Ọgbọ́n tá a fi ju wọ́n ní ọgbọ́n tí àgbàlagbà fi ju ọmọdé ló wà lábẹ́ ìwé. Baba Ibeji was composing fresh materials at home when the court bailiffs arrived. They served him with an order for interim injunction. The court order was as comprehensive as it was broad. Sunny Ade was prohibited from sale, distribution, marketing, dealing, etc., etc. of the record. He read the order again. Even without being a lawyer, he knew the implication of the document he was holding. With palpable emotion, his mind went back to how he came to Lagos from Abeokuta with only 1 shilling and 18 pence. He remembered his years with Baba Salah. He recalled how he got stranded with Baba Salah's traveling theatre in Jeba and Kano, how he did not see his mother for 2 years, while he suffered to make it as a musician. He recalled how his first album sold only 13 copies. Now, when he was at the threshold of success, this court order, with grim determination, he knew he couldn't afford to quit. He remembered his first day at Oshodi when he missed his way trying to locate Moses Olaya's house and how he was directed instead to Dr. Victor Olaya at Tunobo. He recalled how he knelt down in the dust of Oshodi to pray. Immediately he knew what he must do. Sunny went down on his knees and with an emotional voice, he prayed and prayed. He was not the Sunday Adeniyi that knelt down to pray that stood up. He had become empowered. He had become emboldened. That same evening, he established his own label. Sunny Alade Record was born. He didn't bother to sit down again. He remembered the threat of Chief Abioro to bring him down at all costs. He needed a lawyer who knew his law and who would be prepared to fight his cause against these magnates. He went off in search of Gani Fayemi. Gani collected the court papers and looked at the claims. He looked at his clients. He looked again at his claims. Chief Abioro was not leaving anything to chance. He knew what he wanted from the court. His lawyer had read the agreement between African Songs Limited and Sunday Adeniyi. Chief Abioro wanted only 4 things from the court: a declaration that the agreement between ASL and Sunday Adeniyi and his boys was still subsisting, an injunction restraining Sunny Ade from distributing or selling the record on account of all sales of this label, 1 million for breach of contracts. I hope you are not staring at the 1 million and being chicken change. Remember, this was in 1974. Owó tó níyì nígbà yẹn nìyẹn. The price of a brand new Volkswagen Beetle was just about 500 naira at that time. 1 million in 1974 was a priceless sum. On the day of the trial, the court was filled to capacity. On the day of the trial, the court was filled to capacity. Gani Fayemi was armed with every conceivable legal authority. The law books he brought to the court were more than enough to open a library. There were books on contract. There were books on human rights. There were volumes on intellectual properties. Gani even brought some books on slave trade. The first application Gani brought before the court was for an order to compel African Songs to produce its statements of accounts over the preceding 3 years. The court granted the order. It was discovered that the company was making almost 900,000 every year from the sale of Sunny Ade records. It was also discovered that the total sum that King Sunny Ade received was 62,000. In the almost 10 years he was with this company. How can you be asking me what is 900 divided by 62,000? 900,000, don't forget that, divided by 62,000. I have told you that I am not a mathematician, because don't ask me about percentage. Please don't ask me about percentage and fractions. Gani did not forget to raise the issue of how 20 kobo became 15 kobo. He also cross-examined Chief Abioro at length on the onerous terms contained in the contract. Gani put it to the chief that the contract was in restraint of trade, and that was it because null and void as it is amounted to colonization of King Sunny Ade, a free citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and a citizen of the Commonwealth. My Lord Justice L.J. Dosunmu listened patiently to the parties. His lordship also asked the witnesses some probing cases. The court thereafter adjourned the matter to February 14, 1975 for judgment. It did not even occur to the king of African beats that the day was St. Valentine's Day. His only preoccupation was to find out the direction in which the pendulum of justice was going to swing. On February 14th, people started arriving at the court as early as 7 a.m. The court officials had hectic time controlling the mammoth crowd that had come to court to witness the historic decision. In his lordship judgments, Justice Dosunmu held that although some of the terms of the contract were stringent, that was not a ground for holding the contract invalid. In effect, the contract between ASL and KSA was therefore valid. As the court pronounced on the validity of the contract, Sunny looked at his lawyer. Gani signaled to him to be calm. The court had only resolved one issue out of 4. With regards to the second claim, the court held that since the record in question had been distributed all over Nigeria, there was no way the court could order them to be recalled. The court therefore refused to restrain Sunny Ade and his marketer, M. Ola Kazim, from distributing the album. A tiny smile crossed Sunny's face. You recall the Chief Abioro was asking for 1 million as damage for breach of contract. The court ruled that for recording with another company during the subsistency of the contract, Sunny Ade was liable. He was asked to pay 300 naira. Yes, 300 naira, from 1 million to 300 naira. Sunny smiled for the first time. Tó wá lẹ́yìn kan, tó wá jẹ́yìn náà ní nǹkan ẹ̀ ní rẹ́rìn nínú láti odidi 1 million kí wá san 300. The court, having found that the contract was still subsisting, KSA was ordered not to release another album pending the expiration of the contract with Chief Abioro's company, which was due in 6 months. 6 months? What am I going to be eating? Sunny thought. Apparently, this was the only part of the judgment that Auntie Wura, Brother Lani's third wife, must have heard, and heard wrongly too. As if reading Sunny Ade's mind, Justice Dosunmu said he realized that Sunny Ade would need to eat and feed his family in the 6 months that the contract had to run. His lordship therefore held that the injunction was limited to only recording of album and that Sunny Ade was free to do live performances for fees. His lordship said that this was in order to avoid a situation where the king of music would starve or be compelled to go back to Shifa bureaus. The judge had hardly risen before King Sunny Ade jumped up to hug his counsel. He was free. He gave Gani a bear hug. He had learnt his lesson. Creativity and business must go hand in hand. Years later, the king of music recalled, "The lesson I learned from the episode is that if an artist is tuning out its records, they need to keep an eye on the business side of things. If not, it would be in a mess." The lesson I learned from the episode is that if an artist is churning out its records, he needs to keep an eye on the business side of things. If not, it would be in a mess. Written and copyrighted by Onigegewura. This is a very beautiful write-up out there. It is just about what is happening right now between Naira Marley record label and Muhbad. We all know what is happening right now. Kò sígbà tá a fẹ́ fẹnu sí àfẹ́fẹ́nu sí torí pé wà lọ́dọ̀ àwọn ọlọ́pàá láti ṣàtúnṣe. But this is just a lesson for us pé nǹkan tó wà tí story wà fún ni pé gbogbo nǹkan tó ń ṣẹlẹ̀ right now ó ti ń ṣẹlẹ̀ tipẹ́tipẹ́. Látàyé àwọn bàbá wa ló ti ń ṣẹlẹ̀, kò í ṣe ìsìn. So ìjọba ní láti bá wa mójútó àárín yẹn so that, and just like Iyabo Ojo said lánàá àwọn one of the show tó ṣe wípé if you really need help, please get help. Kó tó sign any record label agreement, call a lawyer tó mọ̀ pé ó mọṣẹ́. Tó bá lówó, ask people around for help because that determines and it matters a lot. So because all those small tiny letters tí àwọn òkè ń fojú sí ibẹ̀ ni kíní yẹn. Thank you for listening till I'll see you in my next video. Stay safe, stay blessed. I love you all. Bye.